Hey everyone, welcome to week 39. This is day 4 of our gray week. Now, during the week, we've done on Monday, we've used our raw umber as our dominant color in the mixes for the palette. On Tuesday, for Spanish Tuesday, Martes Español, we used our primaries to try and achieve, grays through complementary mixing. Yesterday, we used an all-earth, very dark palette plus black, and it was very, very cool. And today we're going to see if we can approach grayness through, some other dynamics. So we'll see how it goes. Bye.
Okay, let's get started. This is day 4. This is our ongoing GREYS week. As a small recap, we did a painting where our raw umber was dominant in our mixes on Monday. For Tuesday, we took out that raw umber from our palette. I actually didn't take it out. I just didn't touch it. Evidence is there. You can look at the video. And for Tuesday, we kept our primary colors. So I had my titanium white, obviously, my bismuth yellow, my cat red, alizarin crimson, and ultramarine blue. So I was working with those 4 primaries, 2 in the red hue, 1 in the yellow, 1 in the blue, plus titanium white. And just doing a bunch of complementary mixing, I canceled all that saturation out. There's quite a bit of saturation to start with. If you think about it, our most saturated color is indeed cad red. Then I would say followed by maybe alizarin tied with bismuth yellow. Then ultramarine blue. So I tried my hardest to cancel all of them out just by mixing complementaries. And what we got was a very colorful, albeit gray painting. So they were all, gray hues throughout that painting. A wonderful, I would hope, rich range of gray hues, but gray nonetheless. Yesterday, we went back to the source, back to the core of very fundamental painting, and we used a plethora of dark, very dark earth tones. And I was saying yesterday how I thought, I was trying to be kind of cheeky about it, I think, and I ended up being somewhat redundant because I feel that my White and Raw Umber, which is a very cheap earth tone, a very cheap raw umber that Winsor Newton does, has black in it. And I thought my Castle Earth was going to be my most neutral earth tone, because in my experience, that to me, Castle Earth is kind of like the darkest earth tone that tends to be the most naturally neutral. Castle Earth, Van Dyke Brown. But because Winton's raw umber is actually a brown pigment mixed with a black pigment, it tends to be very, very neutral. And it's actually quite a great color. I actually love it. I could care less if it's quote unquote student grade. You guys already know that I really don't like how they describe those colors. It's just a cheap synthetic earth tone. But it does its job wonderfully well. It's a wonderful neutral gray. So I loved it. So in hindsight, I could have kept just only the Winton Raw Umber or the Castle Earth, and that would have been just fine. But I really liked my 2 extremes of that gamut, which were the my Medi Classico Raw Umber. It has a yellowy red undertone to it. And to the other side, I had Ivory Black. So in essence, I had a very rich, yellowy red earth tone to one side. And then to the other side, I had a very blue-gray with my black. So it gave me a ton of really nice options that paired with something that's very, very important, and we many times forget, that if we use our colors, our pigments, thinned down, and we keep some of those moments where the pigment actually manifests itself when extended with medium, we actually almost get 2 versions of that pigment. The pigment that is going to be mixed with other colors, many times with titanium white. That is my white. So, in my mind, I'm always going to mix them with titanium white. It is going to behave in one way when we mix them with titanium white, and in very different ways when it displays its nature when thinned down with medium, when extended with medium. That was super, super important. And today, what we're going to do is almost like a callback to that first day, but we are going to do it a little bit differently. And I think you guys can already tell what I did. I pretty much pre-mixed a light mid-tone value made up of titanium white and raw umber, and I painted it directly on my paper. I didn't thin it down. I didn't put any medium on it. This is just straight paint. So a lot of the oil is going to be absorbed by the paper. That's going to give me like a nice kind of stiffer surface. It's very nice. Paper behaves in beautiful ways when we work on top of raw paper. We are asking a lot of the paper's fibers because they are indeed sucking in all those oils and all those heavy metals and, many things that may not be beneficial to those fibers. But what it's doing also is just giving us this gorgeous texture because it is absorbing that oil. It is kind of leaving a clayish, I'm going to say it, kind of fragile layer of paint on top of that paper. This is why it's very important that we are conscious about this. We're better off if we do an alla prima painting, just a one session painting. And we don't fuss with the painting a lot. We don't use like a lot of weird mediums on top of the pure paint that we've painted on that first layer. If we do a very simple painting, just one shot and we're done with it, then I don't think we're going to have problems. Problems are going to arise if we start thinking we're very creative and we start putting on top of that layer of paint more layers of paint, which means varying drying times, which means using medium in strange ways sometimes, and probably not being patient. So if we can just work on raw paper and do a painting in one sitting, alla prima, one shot, I think we're going to be pretty fine. But I'm conscious we're asking a lot of like these fibers, the fibers of this paper, of this watercolor paper. We're still using the paper that Katie sent us. So it's an amazing paper. It's about, 50 cents, 40 cents a sheet, maybe. So it's cheap paper, but it's wonderful paper. I actually love it. I adore it. And I adore Katie for sending it to me because it changed my life. The cheap paper that changed my life. But what we've done is we've actually applied the layer of paint onto the paper. Not very thick, although I could have painted on top of a somewhat thicker layer of paint. But, it is pure paint. It's not thinned down. And what we want to gain from doing this is that we are making sure, absolutely sure, that that layer of paint is going to affect every single thing that we put on top. It's even going to affect the value if you think about it, because once we establish that initial value that we want to lay down, our darks are going to be affected. If we want super dark darks, like value 0 darks, we are not going to be able to achieve them. We're probably going to have to put paint down and then probably wait till it sets in a little bit and then just load our brush with a bunch of medium and have a very soft brush and apply that darker color there. But again, that's not very recommendable. You don't want something that's underneath that's thicker that is going to dry very slowly. And you don't want to put something on top loaded with medium, like in my case with liquid, that is going to dry very, very fast. That's a recipe for disaster. That's a recipe for cracking. That's one of the biggest reasons why cracking occurs. Cracking, like natural crackallure, happens in paintings due to like tension and time, and that's totally fine. Every single painting is going to suffer from that. Tiny, tiny little kind of spider web cracks. But the cracking that occurs when we are just not patient comes from us trying to have a layer on top dry faster than a layer that's underneath. So if the layer that's underneath keeps moving, think about it this way. It's as if you were building a building on top of a swamp. You're trying to have your foundation down and you build up, but the swamp is going to keep moving and moving and moving. It's never going to be stable, and the building is going to come crumbling down. That's exactly what happens with paint. So we have to be very, very careful. If we put like a layer of paint, even though this is an alla prima painting, even though this is a one-shot painting, I can still mess it up. I can still do stuff that I'm not supposed to do. And what I'm not supposed to do is I'm not supposed to try and force a darker kind of thinned out layer with a very fast drying medium like liquid dry on top of a kind of impasto-y layer that I had laid initially on that surface. So I have to be very careful with that. Having said that, The coolest part about doing this and the way it differs from the painting that we did on Monday is that we are making sure that there's going to be this huge effect of raw umber, of that raw umber and titanium white mix on every other mix that's going to be on top. That layer is literally setting the tone for the rest of the painting. And I wanted it to be that light, and I wanted it to be kind of like this cooler, more neutral gray, because that's the painting I wanted to paint. I saw this photo of Pog. I am painting Pog, and I think Pog is absolutely amazing. They are incredible. And I wanted to have this coolness be the enveloping atmosphere. I wanted to have clearly a cooler temperature be the dominant one throughout the painting. So every single color mix that you guys are going to see here has that. And I actually brought back from the grave the magenta that I had used a couple of weeks back, and I saw it in my little paint box, and I was like, I should use it. I mean, sometimes I have to force myself to use some of these colors, and I didn't like it. We talked about this, but I think I favor a lot more my alizarin. I absolutely adore my alizarin, but there's something very nice, very saturated and rosy with this quinacridone magenta, and I thought I would give it a shot, given the fact that I had identified that I wanted like this cooler temperature. Now, obviously, alizarin crimson is also very, very cool, so it's not like I'm doing something very different, but I liked the kind of like nice saturated pairing that is that quinacridone and the ultramarine blue. It makes beautiful violets. So I was picturing blue violets and rosy violets when put on top of this gray foundation, and I was like, yeah, that's the painting that I want to make. And I really liked it. I really love doing paintings like this. It goes against, I guess, our naturalist instinct to try and be faithful to the values that we see in nature. And I think that that's the most important part of painting something like this. It's acknowledging that, yeah, there is going to be an effect of that layer of paint. There's no way around it. You can't put a layer of paint down and then expect to be able to execute the exact same painting as if that paint layer was not there. No, it is there for a reason. And I thought it was very cool. And this has to do with my history of painting. I actually love that. I actually love when there is a sort of imposition of value, when a value dictates how the painting is going to be executed and it's going to be read. And I love that we end up sacrificing value range and contrast for harmony and tone. And I've always been a huge fan of that. I think that before wanting things to be kind of fully exhibited, for things to be very evident and easily read in a painting, like easily identifiable in a painting, I think that when I try to understand myself and my own sensibility, I think that I favor atmosphere. I'm always going to be more for atmosphere and less for description. So if you put in a balance on one side, Bouguereau, which I admire profoundly, I want to make that clear. I mean, this is one of the most virtuoso painters in history, and he will forever be one of the most talented painters in history. That's just not even refutable. Nobody had and nobody has had since the formal ability that Bouguereau had. But if I put him on one side of the balance, and if I put Eugène Carrière on the other side, I don't know why my French is so forced with Carrière and not with Bouguereau. Sorry, that's that's on me. But if I put those two amazing artists in my balance, I'm always going to favor Carrière. That's just me. When I'm being honest with myself, when I'm trying to identify the artist that I am, I always look at Carrière and I say, yep, that's me. That's the prophet that I want to follow. If there was a crossroads and one took you to Bouguereau and the other one took you to Carrière, and I'm exaggerating, it's not like we only have these two roads, but I'm trying to make a point where one kind of follows this beautiful description of form and the other one, emphasizes the space, the air that surrounds form. I would choose the atmosphere. I would choose atmosphere like 100 out of 100 times. And that's how I know what type of painter I am. I can appreciate a ton of different painting, but I know that when it comes down to me making a decision of who I am, I'm always going to say, yeah, I'll defend Carrière. Like, I would die on that mountain. I was thinking about the importance of executing a painting in one sitting, because this is actually pretty relevant to this painting, to the execution of this painting. I mean, to every single painting we've done during the year. I mean, all of them have been one-shots. But in this particular manner of constructing a painting, it is very, very clear that we have to be conscious that we're painting on top of paint, on top of a bed of paint. I was thinking of Luc Tuymans. Again, whenever I think of where I gravitate towards, if I'm looking at contemporary painters, somebody like Luc Tuymans, which follows the path of this very expressionist, realist painting a la Richter, I noticed many, many years ago that I have affinity towards those paintings. And most of Tuymans' work is monochromatic. It's executed very hastily. There are paintings that are done in one sitting. It doesn't mean that the one sitting has to be 1 hour of painting. It very well could be, but it has to be finished in one sitting. It has to be, started and executed and finished in that same session. And it can take, however long it can take. You could paint for 20 hours in one day and it's a 20-hour painting, but it's just that one layer of paint. And I think it's just absolutely magical what he can achieve in that one layer of paint, and the richness in the grayness that he gets is just so admirable. When I think about this monochrome painting, and then when I think of, I don't know, let's say Dana Schutz, for example, on the other shore, I love Dana Schutz's paintings, particularly like her, somewhat older work. I look at that color, I look at the hue range and the saturation in her paintings, and it is fantastic. And if I want to go even crazier, and this is a very weird kind of anecdote, but I was lucky enough to see at the Tate David Hockney retrospective. And I had an idea of David Hockney. I think, and I'll begin with my conclusion, I think that because Hockney was part of the story of West Coast art, in the US, there is an image of Hockney that is projected of the type of artist that Hockney was. And it is a very different idea than the one that is presented of Hockney when you travel to the UK. And I think that the notion that we have of Hockney when seen through a US lens is very, very limited. It's extremely limited. When I saw that retrospective, I was like, my God, David Hockney has to be one of the most important artists of the 20th century. I mean, he was an absolute genius. The drawing ability that he has, oh my God, it's through the roof. It's insane. I mean, and not just that formal ability that accompanies the execution of those gorgeous, very sensitive pen and ink drawings, for example. No, it's just the confidence in the mark making that he has in a lot of his portraits. It's just out of this world. I mean, he almost felt like a man from the Renaissance that was living, in the 20th century. But I was blown away, absolutely blown away. And and where I'm trying to go with this is that you're going through all these rooms and you're going in chronological order. So you see the more pop work that he did during the 60s. And eventually, when you travel through the whole show, through the whole retrospective, you reach in the end some of his video work, which is actually really nice, to be honest, and his iPad and iPhone paintings, his digital paintings. The moment I saw them, I was like, oh my God, these are hideous. Why give an old artist a toy? I mean, this is ridiculous. Like, yeah, I'm sure he's happy with his iPhone and his iPad just painting outdoors. And I looked at them and I was like, oh, the colors are so strident. This is horrible. These are terrible. It's like, oh, what a shame, pairing these paintings with these iPad digital paintings. That's what I thought at that moment, because probably I was blown away by his painting. I don't know. I didn't expect it. I have to say that. I realize I sound ignorant when I say it because it's Hockney, and now I realize how big he is. But at the moment, I was like, I just wasn't expecting that. And I remember just leaving and saying, well, yeah, I can forget quickly about his iPad paintings. And here's the cool thing. This was, I don't know, maybe 2 years ago when I saw that show, 2.5 years ago, something like that. And recently, a couple of months back, I was just kind of looking for some images in the internet, and I was looking for some Hockney paintings. And I was looking at these small thumbnails of some of his paintings, and I was like, oh my God, that looks amazing. And I would click it, and it was an iPad painting. And I was like, oh God, these are horrible. No. And like, I regressed, I went back to the experience that I had during the show. And I was like, no, these are terrible. No. What am I doing? Like, it's almost like I was ashamed of myself for saying that it looked cool. So, I very quickly like closed that image and I was like, no. I'm going to take a shower after this and I'm going to look at these images after my eyes are clean. But I felt like this strange attraction to what had just happened. And I was like, what is going on? I'm seeing these tiny little thumbnails of these digital paintings and I'm being blown away. And I'm like, that looks incredible. And the thing is, when I realized that I was looking at a very condensed version of what I had deemed an insanely saturated digital painting. I mean, it literally felt like a finger painting done with an iPad by a 7-year-old who you only give highly saturated colors to work with. It's as if your iPad had like Crayola neon palette and you just pick that. So it was just pure saturation. In my mind, when I think about that, I'm like, yeah, that's hell for me. And now I love those paintings. It's ridiculous. But now I look at those small digital finger paintings and I think I actually love them. This is to say that I'm still a Luc Tuymans fan. If I have to pick a team, again, it would be Carrière and Luc Tuymans. But I can now see something like David Hockney digital painting and also think, hey, in its own weird way, that is absolutely brilliant to me now, and I see it. And all it took was just looking at it, through a computer screen in a very, very small thumbnail size where everything just kind of came together. And I was like, yeah, this is the kind of essence of his painting. It's very strange to say it, but I appreciate those paintings now. And it's pretty remarkable. And I love that I can give myself a chance now to enjoy them and still acknowledge that my nature is still being faithful to my monochromatic tendency. So I can still be both. They don't scare me as much. When I first saw them, I completely dismissed them. I repelled them in a way. And now I can see them and say, hey, this is actually valuable to me. This can actually be valuable to me. This can be work that can help me overcome some of those anxieties I have with color. So I thought it was brilliant. That's it for today. We kind of echoed what we did on Monday on our first day by giving a mixture, a very specific mixture that had a very specific value hierarchy over our other colors. And I think it worked out very, very nicely. So join us tomorrow with our last, and it's going to be a kind of strange one. This is going to be another cameo that one of our past weeks does. And even though our starting point is going to be quite saturated, I'm pretty excited to show you guys what we can do with those two colors. But that's going to be tomorrow. So I'll see you guys then.